Good evening. I'm Raza Siddiqui in today for Andy's Up. When we think about war, we understand that it is life-changing. It has a devastating impact on people, communities, families, and their way of living. We know there will be casualties, and we know life will be forever changed. But then there are other consequences. The words, behaviors, actions that lead to the otherness and dehumanization of people, which often causes hatred towards groups. We see these influences right here at home. Sometimes they manifest into unfriendliness or even hostility towards groups of people based on who they are, if they come from the countries involved in the fighting. In our effort to provide safe space for discussion and a deeper understanding of these critical issues, we're dedicating this week and next week on Chicago Newsroom 2.0. We'll focus on the rise of anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim sentiment in the U.S. and the world. On today's roundtable, we'll have an exclusive conversation with Alison Pure-Slovin, the Midwest Director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Next week, we'll sit in conversation and in community with Ahmed Rahab, the Executive Director of CARE Chicago. But first, up in tonight's one-on-one segment, I'll chat with the CEO of Become. We'll be right back after this short break.
I'm Jamira Alexander, inviting you to join me for a special two-part public narrative, A Word, on mental health specifically in the Black community. We'll explore the public health issue with my very special guest, Josh McGee, investigative reporter for MindSight News. Join the conversation Thursday, November 16th at 7 p.m. on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19, streaming on cantv.org and the CAN-TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
The recent influx of migrants to our area has started a discussion about community in general, including a discussion about those residents believed to have been long forgotten by the rest of the city. Well, today's first guest is the founder and CEO of an organization in the heart of one of these neighborhoods. And she believes that the key to empowering residents of Auburn-Gresham neighborhood to move forward towards a better future lies in the Auburn-Gresham residents themselves and their willingness to identify their own skills to address the things they'd like to see improve in their own communities. How can they do that? And how can other Chicago communities empower their residents to do the same? Well, to help me explain that is today's first guest. Please help me welcome to the program Dr. Dominica McBride, founder and CEO of Become. Dr. McBride, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Your website says Become was founded out of a passion to create social justice and realize the potential of thriving communities. Tell us more about that. Do you feel social justice is missing in the Auburn-Gresham community?
Yeah, so I'll start with talking a little bit about our name, Become. Okay. Become means to begin to be, and the thing is that we cannot begin to be anything that we aren't already. Right, that potential needs to lie within us. Like a seed for a rose can't become a tree, right, and vice versa. And the thing is that the seed for what is possible in our communities and in our country lies within us. And a lot of times it lies dormant because of oppression, because of all the isms, racism, heterosexism, classism. It often clouds our ability to see the potential within ourselves. So I grew up in a small rural town in Michigan where I was one of a handful of people of color in the town, and I experienced two very different sides of people in the town. In one way, in one area, with one group, I experienced blatant racism throughout my childhood. And in another area, I experienced a close-knit, loving community. And with that experience, I wanted to be a part of the healing of communities of color, especially out of racism, out of oppression, out of the effects of that, and into more loving, close-knit communities.
I love how you said you inspire these seeds. You inspire them to grow and become what they should. How did you take the situation where you grew up with this racism, but also it sounds like that there was a community that fostered you?
Yeah.
How did that seed blossom? And how do you translate that life experience into the work that you are doing with your organization here in Chicago?
Yeah. That seed blossomed both out of the pain and healing process, but also out of having love around me, right? Having strong relationships, having a strong, loving family, having neighbors where I could just go up and say, hey, do you have some sugar that we could borrow, right? Here are some cookies for the holiday, and people doing that for each other. It really was like that village that a lot of people talk about a long time ago, like growing up in a village, and it felt like that. And so even though I experienced the pain of rejection and that kind of insult, being able to tap into loving, strong relationships helped me to know that that's not the only experience to have, right? We can have this other thing, and that led me to go on the journey towards psychology. So I got my bachelor's in psychology, and when I was a junior in college, I had a mentor who was a community psychologist. And we were sitting in her office at Michigan State University, and she asked me, what do you care about? And I told her I cared about fixing the ills of community, the results of racism and oppression, like education disparities and health disparities. I cared about finding out what works to shift things and finding out what doesn't work and letting that go. And then she said, oh, it sounds like you care about evaluation. And so that set me on this path to evaluation, which is basically this process of learning about what works, learning about the impact of a strategy or a program or a process. And
well, let me ask you this. That process, I imagine, would be very different in a village, right, in Michigan, and the community in Chicago. I would at least venture to guess it might be a little harder to meet the challenges of inspiring people and reaching out to them. And I want to ask you, how have you been able to do that with the communities that you service here in Chicago? And have you found the community to be receptive?
Oh, yeah. I think, or in our experience, when you have authenticity and you listen, right? You take a stance of deep listening and building strong relationships with people. Like, people want to be listened to, and they want to have strong relationships. And so coming with that goal of creating community and being in community with people, then we can co-create together.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that really fascinated me about what you guys have done to foster this engagement is that you guys wrote a book, not just you, but it sounds like the whole organization. And we hear about, programs that will have one-on-ones, they'll have seminars, they'll have workshops. Kind of tell me about what drove the idea and the inspiration to write a book, and has there been engagement with that?
Yeah. So the work of Become sits at the intersection of social science research and community activism to facilitate healing in community and for community to create the change they want to see. And in the work, we've worked with various organizations and across the city, especially in BIPOC communities and neighborhoods in the city. And some of the work that we've seen has really been grounded in women of color. Women of color leadership. And so we've worked with Chicago Foundation for Women and Public Allies and other foundations and programs. And we've seen women of color organizers and philanthropists and nonprofit leaders, and we've got a chance to listen to them and listen to them across different programs. And we learned that there are some really powerful themes across there that talk about the development of authentic, liberated leadership, especially for women of color, but it has implications for everyone, really. And we saw it was so powerful, we needed to create a book. We needed to get the word out to women of color across the country and to other people too, organizations that want to really foster leadership development for women of color as well. And it's really a guide, a transformative guide around how we step into our healing, how we step into our higher self.
And I really want to focus on that. Like, you have found a way to make that seed grow into, a flower and inspire these people. What are some of the ways that you believe it's different for women of color to achieve this healing, to find their authentic self, and how have you been able to make that seed a flower?
Yeah, so Becoming Changemakers is the title of the book, The Exquisite Path to Leadership and Liberation for Women of Color. And healing, the way that this is different is the combination of these four elements of one, recognizing trauma, right? Because a lot of times we can just push that away. Say like, I'm okay. It wasn't that bad. And then we forget, or we just don't tap into the pain that really is there. We just a lot of times become numb to it, or we're in situations that aren't conducive to us like really breaking down a bit to really feel what's there and feel the pain. And so we often think we have to be strong and push through and help everybody else.
Well, and I want to ask you that when we talk about becoming involved and helping people, if people want to help your organization, how can they participate in it? What can they do? Yeah,
so becomecenter.org is our organization's website. And if you are in Auburn Gresham, reach out to us. We are conducting Hope and Community Chats and bringing people together to think about what the collective dream is and move towards that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Dr. McBride, it's been a pleasure to have you as today's guest. And to learn more about the work of Become, visit, as you said, www.becomecenter.org. We'll be right back after this break with our special roundtable discussion. Stay with us.
Joining me on the next episode of Every Day is a Yay is Deshauna.
I think you have to have discernment when you're listening to yourself or other people.
Yes.
For me, I struggle sometimes because I'm a collaborator. When do I choose to make the final decision and say no?
Join the conversation Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. on CanTV Cable Channel 19 and streaming on cantv.org and the CanTV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
In May of 2022, the Anti-Defamation League published Hate in the Prairie State, a report that detailed startling rise in hate crimes against Jewish residents right here in the state of Illinois. The recent conflict along the Gaza Strip has only served to heighten the concerns of members of the Jewish American community about their safety in the face of rising anti-Semitism. In recent weeks, anti-Semitic messages were found on parked vehicles in Jefferson Park and outside homes in LaGrange Park. Joining me today to discuss the causes, effects, and potential solutions for the rise of anti-Semitic views and activities is my guest, Alison Pure-Slovin, Midwest Director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. The first thing I want to ask you is, can you give us a quick overview of the mission and the work of the Simon Wiesenthal Center?
Yes, thank you. The Simon Wiesenthal Center was founded in the 1970s. It is named after Mr. Simon Wiesenthal. He was a Holocaust survivor who, upon liberation, weighed 86 pounds and lost 89 members of his family. And when we went to find the International Jewish Human Rights Organization, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, he wanted to make sure that we would be an activist organization because he understood that, unfortunately, that what happened to the Jews during the Holocaust was not the first or the last time that there would be a genocide or hate against a people.
So tell me about the work that he did. You said he was one of the most famous Nazi hunters. Kind of tell me how that happened, what the process was, and how it's inspired the continuing work that he's been part of.
So Mr. Wiesenthal, before the war, was an architect. And upon death's door, because as I said, he weighed 86 pounds upon liberation, he started recording as quickly as he can the perpetrators of the Holocaust. And because he was watching them upon liberation leave the camps and get away with what they did. And so he had promised that he would do justice, not vengeance, and that he would try to bring to justice as many people as he could. He was able to record 22,000 perpetrators of the Holocaust, but only 1,100 upon his death were brought to justice. And as I said, when we created the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which was founded by Rabbi Marvin Heyer, he's the founder and dean, Mr. Wiesenthal wanted to ensure that we made sure that there be no perpetration of hate to any people in this world. So yes, we're a Jewish human rights organization first and foremost, but we also fight for the rights of other people as well.
And what you mentioned about fighting for the rights of other people, I would understand to be extremely important with what we're seeing with wall-to-wall coverage on the news about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. There's a lot of people who are still unclear about the decades-long unrest in the region. Can you help explain to the viewers a fuller picture, fuller understanding of that situation and what your organization is doing?
So in terms of what's going on in Gaza, let's remember it started in Israel. Let's remember, please, that it started with terrorism. Plain and simple terrorism. Hamas terrorists came into the part of Israel and murdered Israelis and other people who lived in that community, and that was not an act of war. You don't go against citizens who are sleeping in their beds. You don't behead children. You don't rape women and call that an act of war. So that we have to be very clear about. And when you talk about occupation, 2005, Israel pulled out of Gaza. Israel has not had a presence in Gaza since 2005 when we gave the land back. I want to be clear about what that looks like and what's going on right now in terms of the tunnels that are underneath is a way that the Hamas terrorists are coming in to try to kill Jews in the area and in Israel. And from Palestine, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. What does that mean? Where's the river and where's the sea? We're talking about from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. That's all of Israel. So that's not a two-state solution. That's saying that Hamas wants a one-state solution, and that doesn't include Israelis or Jews or anybody that lives in Israel.
Playing devil's advocate here, I am going to ask about the fact that you made it a point to say that you don't go after women, you don't go after children, you don't go after innocents. There's been a lot of people who have pushed back and stated that many people in Gaza and in the Gaza Strip themselves are not the people who necessarily initiated the attack, that was a political, militant, even extremist faction of Hamas. Can the same message be understood or addressed in terms of the innocents and the civilians, women and children in the Gaza Strip region?
When countries are attacked, they have to respond, and there's always innocent victims to that response. 9/11, didn't America go and respond to the terrorism in this country? Let's talk about it from that perspective. Even when you talk about the Holocaust, and America came in to free the concentration camps and the world, weren't there innocent civilians? More Germans were killed in that during World War II, and more people were killed that were innocent. But you have to stop the terrorism and the attacks. Otherwise, they'll just continue. What's the response? During 9/11, should America not gone in and stopped the terrorism? What did we do?
America went into countries and America addressed the situation. But as we've stated, in situations of war and in situations of attack, there needs to be a response. But I think what's important, at least I'm sure to our viewers, is the discussion and the understanding of perspectives from both sides, right? Because I think the most dangerous thing is to be in silos and not to be able to communicate, which is why I appreciate you giving a perspective, because obviously we've seen in the city of Chicago both sides trying to make their view, and I think what's fundamentally important is that both sides communicate and that conversations like this continue to happen, which is why I'm happy to share the stage and have this discussion with you. And so the next question, I'm sure will be one as well that our viewers would be interested in knowing the answer to, and I would as well. And that is, there have been renewed calls for either a one-state or a two-state solution for the decades-long conflict. Could you explain to our viewers what these mean And what is your perspective and the perspective of your organization
So in the founding, when
this?
the UN voted for Israel to create the state of Israel, 1948, there was a two-state solution. Transjordan was Palestine, and then there was land that was put aside for Israel. And the first thing that happened after that vote was that the Arab countries attacked Israel. Then let's go to the Oslo Accords. Wasn't that a two-state solution? Yasser Arafat himself stood on the lawn of the White House and shook hands to a two-state solution, and part of Israel, part of Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, was going to be the capital of the two states. But again, he walked away from that accord, the Oslo Accords. Let's talk again about Gaza. Land for peace. We gave back. We took Jews. The IDF came in and took Jews who lived in what's considered Gaza, or as we call Gush Katif, and took them out of their homes and gave it back to the Palestinian people or the Arab people. And again, we still don't have a two-state solution. Israel, time and time again, continues to try to do land for peace, to no avail, unfortunately.
So what impact is the ongoing conflict in Israel having on the Jewish people living in the United States?
The impact that the conflict has on the Jewish people here in the United States is that anti-Semitism is become full circle. It has definitely been an underlying threat to the American people, American Jewish community for a long time. The white supremacist movement and the movement called accelerationists, which believes that the greatest threat to this country are the Jews, have risen to the top. It's something that we've been watching for numerous years, and the accelerationists are now buying into the Hamas mission of trying to create a world free of Jews. We're watching that greatly. We're seeing a lot of cross chatter about that in the Telegram channels. We've been monitoring that for a long time. And on the surface level, in terms of the synagogues and the places, that other places, the community centers, etc., people are very frightened. Jewish people are very frightened. They're not wearing their Jewish stars per se. They're scared that they'll be hit on the street. There's footage of New Yorkers who are Jewish, visibly Jewish, walking down the street. People come up to them and just punch them in the face because they're Jewish. So there is that real fear. And in Skokie just recently, those who have some posters on their lawn that are the two flags, it's the American flag and the Israeli flag, there's been a lot of vandalism of people pulling them down, ripping them up, and screaming at Jews as they walk down the street. So there is a heightened fear in terms of the anti-Semitism.
And we talked a little about it, but can you define for our viewers the definition of anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism is anything that is a hate crime. It's hateful speech towards a Jew, and for no other reason other than they're Jewish. So if it's hate speech, if it's vandalism, putting a swastika on something would be considered an anti-Semitic or a hateful symbol. So that would be the definition. It's just hating someone for being a Jew.
Some have claimed that there is a proposed intent on the part of some Jewish advocacy groups to conflate the terms anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, a conflation that suggests rather strongly that to be against Israel actions in Gaza is to be anti-Semitic. How would you respond to that?
I don't agree. I think you cannot support the state of Israel, but that doesn't necessarily make you an anti-Semite. At least that's how we felt in the past. These days is definitely across, it has become more of the mainstream that you're anti-Semitic and you're anti-Zionistic. You can also, by the way, support the state of Israel, but not support the government. I'm an American. I vote in America just like you do in Israel, but that doesn't mean I always like the government, and I can disagree with the state, the country of America. You can disagree with the politics of Israel, and the only thing I ask anybody is, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist? To me, that's the crucial question. Do you believe that Israel has a right to exist? Because you don't, then you really are an anti-Zionist. Now, many people will say I could be an anti-Zionist, but that doesn't make me an anti-Semite. But lately, we are seeing that there is a cross to both of those.
And what do you say to the more than 1,000 Jewish peace activists who gathered outside the Israeli consulate here in Chicago on Monday, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza?
People can call for a ceasefire in Gaza. but I would say to them that during that ceasefire, I would like the Red Cross to go in and get the 240 hostages that we have no idea if they're alive or dead and what condition they're in, or that they should be released. And the way that the activists went to protest at the Consul General to Israel's building was really inappropriate. They took over a building, it's public property, they took over the escalators, etc. That is not a peaceful way of protesting. If you look at all the pro-Israel vigils that you see, they are peaceful, there are prayers, there are songs, we are demanding for the release of the hostages. The other thing I'd like to point out is if you look at the pro-Israel vigils, there's always an American flag and an Israeli flag. If you look at pro-Palestinian protests, there's only one flag. It is a Palestinian flag. We live in the United States of America. This country guarantees our freedom as well, and I think there should be a respect for the United States flag as well.
If people want to find out more about the foundation, could you please tell us how they can get involved and the type of work that your organization does?
Thank you. So the work that we do from the Midwest office, for which I'm the director, is educational work. We like to educate students in schools. We have a mobile museum of tolerance, which is an incredible bus that goes around the state of Illinois educating students about how to be an upstander, not a bystander, through the lens of history, whether it's the Holocaust or civil rights. We also have programs on fake news versus real news, or digital media literacy, because we have to learn how to shut down hate on the internet. So that's one of our projects, Mobile Museum of Tolerance, mmot.com, or the Simon Wiesenthal Center through our office is wiesenthal.com, wiesenthal.com. And again, we like to be activists in the arena of education because I think there's a lot of ignorance right now about what's going on in the world.
Well, Alison, thank you so much for making the time to share your thoughts with us today. I'll be back with some final thoughts right after this. Ralph Carr is a name not known to many, but he's a hero of mine. A former governor of Colorado from 1939 to 1943, he opposed Japanese American internment camps. His views at the time were unpopular in the region, but he stood steadfast in what he believed to be right and against what history has shown to be wrong. All people in our country deserve and are entitled to three things: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And no matter one's views on the current conflict in the Middle East or the arrival of asylum seekers here in Chicago, no one has the right to target any group of human beings. That's something worth repeating because it needs to be heard. No one has the right to target any other human being, whether it's based on their skin color, sexual orientation, or religion. The strength and distinction of our nation is that it brings many different people together and allows discussion of ideas and the freedom to say your piece, but also the ability to be heard. Every person has the right to life and the right to security. An ends justifies the means approach is never acceptable when it involves causing intentional harm to innocent civilians. At the end of the day, we are all humans deserving of grace and our life. That part is not terribly complicated, or at least it shouldn't be. Thank you for joining us tonight. Andy returns to the desk next week to talk with Executive Director of CARE Chicago, Ahmed Rahab. I'm Raza Siddiqui. Until next time, take care.